What is going on, movie fans? So I just watched all 8 of the films in the Conjuring universe in preparation of the 4th Conjuring film itself, not the 4th film in the extended universe, which also includes the 2 Nun movies and the 3 Annabelle movies, which I actually was not aware there were 3 Annabelle movies prior to doing this ranked series. Um, but in preparation of the 4th Conjuring film, which drops later this year, they just dropped the trailer, and I reviewed the trailer of it with some mixed feelings about the upcoming Conjuring drop. But I wanted to kind of rewatch the entire series and just kind of get a new temperature check on these films. Like I said, I was unaware there was a third Annabelle film, and I had never seen the second Nun film. So a couple of these were new to me. But with all these films, we watch them and I rank them out of 10 different categories. We're looking at everything from the characters to the antagonist, the script itself, the filming, the sound design, all the things that help make a movie good. We rank those and I score them out of a score of 100, and then plot that out. So here we are. We always start with the bottom, the worst of the worst. At number 8, we have The Nun. And I put this at, it was about 29%. One of the things that comes up a lot as I was watching this is they reused the exact same scenes from the opening of the first Conjuring film when the Warrens, played by Patrick Warren and Vera Farmiga, are sitting with the roommates talking about the Annabelle doll. They use this scene so many times, and the reason they're using it is to remind you, hey, do you remember that much better movie that you once saw that you wish you were watching, but instead you're watching this one? They use it so many times it actually becomes laughable and offensive. So I'll point out how many times they use it. They definitely use it in this one. It's like, we get it. This is a spinoff of what was actually a better movie. The entire set of The Nun feels cheap. It feels like a sound stage. It feels like it was shot in a studio setting, and it probably was shot on a soundstage versus shooting on location. But it really cheapens the overall atmosphere in what should have been an atmospheric horror film. The whole movie, you can tell they were cutting corners. The positives were not many. Like they cast Tessa Farmiga, which was clever, being that she's related to Vera Farmiga. As the one of the 2 protagonists in this. But okay, she does a terrible job. Sorry, she doesn't do well. There's no character development. The acting's really poor, and it's hard to tell if it's the acting itself that's the problem, or it's just a really bad script, because it is a really bad script. This feels like a cheap monster movie. You have the Frenchie character who's just his whole character is, he's just a horny French guy. Like, I mean, it's just like, it's that pathetically insulting how bad the character development is on this. The characters just constantly make one dumb choice after another. Like, they decide, oh, it'd be a good idea to split up. Just mere hours after one of the characters gets literally buried alive by a spirit, and no, we're just going to split up as if nothing nefarious is happening or nothing untoward is going on here. I did appreciate how they tied into the opening of the original Conjuring film at the end. Okay, that was clever, but outside of that, there was nothing really interesting about this film. The one scene that I did like was, there's a scene where Frenchie's walking through this big room, and there's all these nuns in the room with cloths over their face and blood on their face, and they're frozen and they all kind of twitch simultaneously. It was a really creepy scene. It's a good scene. I liked it better when they did it in Silent Hill, though, because that felt like a Silent Hill ripoff. Okay, moving up to number 7, we have The Nun II, which isn't much better. And what disappointed me is I was hearing a lot of people say it was significantly better than the first. Not really. The things that they did better is, 1, they actually did spend time to develop characters. 2, it's clear they shot on locations. And 3, the acting did improve. So they actually tried to develop the characters. There is improved set and locations. But the editing is still really choppy. The cinematography is not that great. The flow of the film is really rough to get through. It feels like a slasher film. as opposed to a either an atmospheric horror or a haunting film or a religious horror film or demonic possession film. This just feels like a slasher movie, and not in a good way, not in a fun way. It has very weak CGI. They got rid of the Father Burke character off screen, which I thought was interesting. And there's a lot of WTF moments. Like, WTF is Deborah in the meeting with Irene when she's told about Valak? Why was she there? And WTF did the church not send anyone else with Irene to combat this demon? Oh, this is the biggest thing we faced. Yeah, you just take this alone. Like, I mean, there were so many just awful things in the script that were done purely for plot convenience. But okay, acting was a little better, but man, overall, this was just a boring movie. It wasn't that fun to watch. All right, moving up to number 6, we have the first of the Annabelle films. Once again, we're repeating a scene from The Conjuring to open this movie, and it really begs the question: who's buying these dolls that look so creepy? There is this really cool shot in the first act where the lead actress, the protagonist, wakes up, and you're kind of getting this pan shot from her into the neighbor's house. I think that was done really effectively. It was the best shot in the movie, actually. I really liked the kind of reference and play into the Helter Skelter vibe. I thought that was interesting. Act 2 then just gets really boring. Yeah, there were some creepy scenes, like the child or the doll turning into Annabelle, or excuse me, the child turning into an adult Annabelle as it's running out the door. That was a good scene, good jump scare, but all the characters were kind of dull in one note. They had the trope of the black savior, which was a little rough to see. The lead character had no arc in it. It's just rough pacing, just didn't really go anywhere. And then there was no payoff at the end. It just kind of, all right, I guess we're ending and leaving it open for a sequel. All right, moving on to number 4. We have, number 5. You got a preview. All right, number 5, we have Annabelle Comes Home, which is the third of the series, of the Annabelle series. I did not know this one existed, and clearly they filmed this one on a minimal budget. It again opens with a scene from another one of the Conjuring films, or the first Conjuring films. And Patrick Warren really plays such a jerk when he's playing, or Patrick Wilson. Patrick Wilson really plays Ed Warren like a jerk. And it really, in this one, it's this bravado and cockiness. It's just not a good look. It's not interesting. It doesn't make him likable. But clearly they're on a limited budget, because they must have only had Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga for like a day or two to film all their scenes for the intro and the outro, and then they're not in the rest of the movie. They even used them. I don't even know if it was them, but they used a voiceover of them in one of the other scenes. But the premise is real simple. Oh, what if a bunch of teens got into this haunted room with all these artifacts? All right, great. Not interesting, not that great. There was even a werewolf in the movie. Like, we've kind of thrown the rule book out the window. Like, I thought this was supposed to be like an atmospheric horror vibe, or ties into religious horror, but now we're doing werewolves, and I'm not really sure why. Bad script, bad acting. The special effects felt like it was like a TNT or sci-fi show. Like, that's the kind of vibe we had here. And then just the ending was real cheesy. So there you go. All right, moving on to number 4, Conjuring the Devil Made Me Do It, the third Conjuring film. I had ranked this at a 48%, and I wrote this should have been much lower. This movie really frustrated me. There was so much in it that it's just, I think, was insulting to the audience, that they know the audience was going to pay to see this movie, despite how boring this movie is. They opened with a ripoff of The Exorcist, which I thought was in poor taste. They copied the tracking shot that they did in the first two. The characters are very unlikable. They're very annoying. The dialogue is very cringy and extremely hyperbolic, and the story logic just doesn't make sense, where you have this lawyer who's not going to do anything the entire movie to defend her client, but it's just up to Ed and Lorraine to save the day as they're playing detectives in this kind of whodunit mystery, which is not really that interesting. Also, is this a public defender? Like, why is the lawyer doing nothing in this film? The trailers and the marketing materials are about how they have to convince a jury that, if everyone's believing in God and, people have to swear on the Bible before they take the witness stand, maybe it's time they actually acknowledge the presence of the devil. Nothing happens in a courtroom. There's nothing in a courtroom here. That's what I thought we were going to get, is something in regards to the proceedings of this trial, and really it wasn't it at all. Most of, it just kind of is summed up in a wrap up in the last 5 seconds with I think some text on the screen. And then they really kind of hit home this Ed and Lorraine love story. Like, do we need to believe they're in love? Like, it's the third film of them being married together. Like, this feels unnecessary, and we're just padding time here. I don't know how this ranked at a 48%, because this should have been much lower. I'm surprised this was number 4. Okay, moving up to number 3. We have Annabelle Creation, which was the second of the 3 Annabelle films. Once again, we cut from another scene from The Conjuring. They keep spoon feeding us these Conjuring flashbacks. This also feels like the rules got thrown out. Annabelle can kind of be whatever the demon wants to be in that. Okay. Although there is a fun cameo of the real Annabelle doll in this. Now, I don't know if it was the real doll or just the actual Raggedy Ann doll that was Annabelle. Had a little cameo. I thought that was clever. But overall, this was a decent popcorn movie. Like, it wasn't great, but it wasn't that bad. There was a few good jump scares. The filming wasn't awful. The characters were a little bit more nuanced. The acting was better. And it had a decent pacing to it. Like I said, there was a few good jump scares. It was like, okay, it was fun. This was a kind of a dumb, fun movie. I'd kind of put it right in the middle of the road in regards to the scoring. And then that leads us to number 2 and number 1, which, process of elimination. Number 2, we have The Conjuring 2. Here's why The Conjuring 2 did not rank higher. They ended up copying, for all the things The Conjuring 2 did well, and there was a handful of things that did well, it ended up copying so much of what the original film did. And we'll get into an example of this. Okay, so we start with a cold opening about the Amityville case, which, there's this voiceover from Lorraine of how that case still haunts her. Well, why are we doing that movie then? Like, there's all these hyperbolic statements of, there's the case that I can't forget, or the case that's the last case, or the case that, has never escaped me, the case that impacted us the most. It's very hyperbolic. And we've done it at every single movie. Every single movie is like the biggest. But now you're doing it with the cold open. Like, oh, this case, still haunts me. Well, let's make that movie then. Let's do that movie. They teased the nun at the beginning. But aside from the nun tease in the opening was really clunky and awkward and didn't fit tonally with the rest of the movie. Okay, the blowing leaves on the ground with the camera tracking over it. We had that in part 1. We copied it in part 2. The tracking shot through the house, we did that in part 1. We did it again in part 2. They ended up doing it again in part 3. The what's in the shadows. I see something in the shadows. Don't you see what's in the shadows? Hey, we did that in part 1. We're doing it again in part 2. No one hearing something really loud happening. Did that in part 1. We'll do it again in part 2. A sleepwalking trope. Did that in part 1. We'll do it again in part 2. The family sleeping together in the living room. We did that in part 1. We're going to do it again in part 2. The creepy basement trope. Did that in part 1. We're going to do it again in part 2. Don't you see it again? That quote, we did that in part 1. We're going to do it again in part 2. We're not reinventing anything. We're just copying what worked in the original film. Even specific scenes or camera shots or sounds we're copying, we're just plugging into part 2. And that, to me, is insulting to the audience. But there is some things that this film does well. It has way better character development than the first one. uh, I love the Valak character, and I love the clues that they planted throughout the movie of who Valak is. You know, if it was like the refrigerator magnets, letters on a bookshelf. There were some notes taped to the wall in their home. Those clues were kind of fun. The CGI in this film, the CGI in a lot of these films really struggles, but the CGI in this one, particularly of the Crooked Man, was really horrendous. They also flipped the roles, which I thought was interesting. So in the first film, um, you know, Lorraine wants in, we have to do this case, and Ed's like, no, we can't do this case. And then this one, they just flipped it. Ed's like, oh, we got to do this case. Lorraine's like, oh, we can't do this case. We shouldn't do this case. So lack of consistency. Act 2 was a little slow. They didn't get to the house to actually investigate the house until an hour into the film of a 2-hour film. But here's what would have made this film better. The reason that they did the cold open with Amityville is because of how much of a media frenzy happened around the Amityville horror and how much the Amityville was labeled as a hoax. And that was essentially a stain on Ed and Lorraine's perceived profession or their professionalism. And that made them a little leery to be involved in this other case, and how the the TV media, especially in the UK, could be portraying them with their involvement of, is this really happening? Is this a hoax? That was severely underplayed. And had that been the underlying current of this movie would have been infinitely better. If it was better rooted in why they're making the decisions they're making, why they're hesitant to do things, why they're, cautious or have trepidations about their involvement because of what happened at Amityville, that would have been a better movie. But they teased it, but they didn't commit to it, and that, I think, was a huge missed opportunity. But the acting was so good in this movie. Really creepy scenes in this film. Great use of color in this movie. Amazing sound design in this movie. I mean, it really, really will creep you out. All right, and there we are with number 1, the original Conjuring. So the original Conjuring colds open with the Annabelle storyline, which we then see, how many times have we mentioned it? The kind of transitions into this forced exposition seminar, where they're, introducing themselves and their profession in a packed room. And I was at a lot of seminars in college, and it was never a packed room, and no one was ever that interested in the presentation. But really good soundtrack in this movie. The casting was a little curious. Ron Livingston is the father character. I wasn't too sure about. All the daughters kind of blend together. They don't really feel that interesting. So the whole thing kind of hinges on the mom, who does a decent job, but without much support around her character, the acting did feel a little stale. There was so many great shots in this movie, from the hands coming out of the darkness at multiple points to the very shallow depth of field that they were using with stuff happening in the background that I thought was incredibly effective. What they were showing, shining light on, what they were choosing to leave in shadow, I thought was incredibly effective from a cinematography perspective. The bed sheet where Lorraine is doing the laundry. Oh, sorry. I have to mention this. Another trope that they did in the first one that they end up doing in the sequel is Ed Warren fixing stuff around the house. They did that in the first one. He's fixing the truck, and then they did in the second one where he's fixing the plumbing. Okay, great. So back to this really great scene where Lorraine is folding the laundry, and Ed, drops a bedsheet in the wind, and it hits this figure that wasn't supposed to be standing there before it then flutters up to the house. Like, that is such a good scene. No one saw it coming. There's a lot of scenes like that are really packed into this movie that, even on rewatch or multiple watches, still have a pretty good hit to them. The downside is, okay, no character arcs in this film. No one changes. No one learns anything. There's no real character development or resolution for the characters. Also, I found it odd that they took so at the end of every one of these movies, they take an item and they put it in their museum of haunted items, which in one of the films, it was whichever one was the third one. I don't know. Or maybe it was the Annabelle one. Doesn't matter. It was the Annabelle one, where it was like, hey, this feels like it should just be a TV show. like not a thing. Like every show or every episode of the show, they get a new object they put in the museum. That's kind of how it felt. But anyway, it was interesting that they took the music box because that was being used by Rory, which I thought was a good ghost in the movie. So I don't know. I thought that was an interesting choice. Maybe I'm putting more thought into it than the writers did. Yeah, there was a lot of logic holes. Like, there's this massive loud sound where all the picture frames fall off the wall, but no one wakes up from it because they need everyone to wake up. A couple scenes later, when the mom's trapped in the basement, fine. But overall, it's a fun movie. Is it a great movie? No, it's a good movie though. Great use of sound design, really good cinematography, really creepy visuals. It's a fun movie. I mean, I had it at like a 75%. That's fun. That's a fun movie. It's not a great movie. It's not a movie I'm going to watch a lot, but it is a fun movie. So there it is. There's the ranking of all the Conjuring films in the Conjuring universe in preparation of the 4th Conjuring film and the 9th in the installments coming out later this year. Conjuring Last Rites, which we did a trailer breakdown of that on the channel, so you can check that out. As always, we appreciate you checking this out. Let me know what your ranking is in the comment section below. I always love to see when people are ranking their films and just kind of how it correlates. Obviously, everyone's entitled to their own subjective opinion on these things, but that's kind of what makes it so fun to talk about and unpack. So thank you so much for tuning in. I just finished rewatching all the Predator universe films, so I'll have that coming out next, and try to get that out next week for you. So thank you so much again for tuning in. Catch you all on the next screening. Take care, everyone.